Thank you. I want to thank NASCA for having me, and thank you for putting on this virtual conference. This has been great. It's been fun to watch, and I think you guys are doing a great job with this. I wanted to touch on today about transforming procurement, but really talk about what we're seeing is two major political things around procurement. One would be the emergency response to PPE, and the other one is supplier diversity. So wanted to share a little bit about our experience of what's going on in this, crazy time. We service over 1,000 government entities, 8 states doing procurement transformation. We've had experience in natural disasters. We were involved with some customers during Katrina and Harvey. So we knew a little bit about emergency response, but not to the scale of what we've seen today. Our company actually, we had seen what had happened with Katrina, and we knew we needed to prepare as a company. So I think on March 10th, everything hits, everything closes down. We have offices across the country. Come March 11th, we're up and ready to go. We had kind of had things in place and working remotely. So we're really proud of our team and really proud of our government partners working together on this. On the first slide, I'll share a little bit is, this is procurement transformation. A lot of us have seen this. These are kind of savings numbers, efficiency numbers. We see reduction in cycle times, price on goods, vendor participation. But more so, we move over to really, how does procurement transformation really touch on, PPE and emergency response with PPE and what we've seen and some lessons we've learned. So, the first thing is, let me click to the next slide. Okay. Share screen. Sorry about that.
Hey, Brian, while you're doing that, I'm going to switch off your microphone and switch it on again. You're cutting out just slightly, and we're going to do that old tech, switch it off and switch it on again, sophisticated trick. So you're going to go quiet for a moment, and then we'll pull you right back. So you play around with your slides if you get that in slide view.
Got it.
I've given you voice back. Let's see how that goes.
Okay, how's that? Is that better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay, great. So procurement transformation is not a choice. So we've seen, everybody's seen these kind of numbers in the markets, power transformation, which you can get, transforming procurement, that's from, e-procurement to a lot of other initiatives. But then you really come to talking about, procurement transformation and how it helps in emergency response. What we saw with our customer base is really this extensive supplier network. A lot of the states had their vendor network, the network that they went to within their databases to try to find suppliers. And when that didn't work, we calling overseas, calling every different, group you could. Well, I think the key to this is that you have the ability to go to a larger supplier network. We have within our group over 500,000 small businesses at Periscope that you can reach out to. And there's other vendors in the market that have that too. So it's really key that you need that supplier network that you can reach out to that's an expansion of what you currently have today. We also found that comparison shopping and purchasing was huge. You needed a one-stop shop place to kind of, go shop for these goods. How do you see them? How do you get to them? A consumer shopping environment. But it's also, it kind of has the rules and regulations around government shopping. So you could still have your rules and regs, but you can comparison shop. You could look, you could have, access to this supplier network. The other thing we found was cooperative agnostic. So what I mean by that is we saw in a lot of instances with our government entities that we saw vendors that were on, U.S. Communities, Value Point. We saw vendors that were on, state contracts. We saw vendors that were on GSA. And so a way to access all those different possibilities of cooperatives in one environment to shop, find, see, compare. And so when you roll a large supplier network, a shopping experience, and being about, hey, where's the quickest way to get to the purchase I can get there in this emergency environment? Just jumping over to, I hit the slide again. So just to talk a little bit, Scott, about, what we saw and what we did. We saw emergency e-bidding, which was huge. So the ability for a government to go out in a state and have an emergency e-bidding solution. I think there were a lot of groups in the market that were doing this, but we were doing it, giving it away free, where you could post a bid, big supplier network, and get responses. And then in turn, you flipped over to the emergency marketplace, and after those are awarded, you can populate this marketplace. We did as a company, I think we did about 10 to 20 different RFIs that went out, populated a marketplace. We stood it up with PPE. We gave free access to it. We vetted vendors, which was a big deal. And then we allowed purchasing through it, or we just allowed for, states and local entities just to shop and find. It was a really difficult time. So Scott, I want to make sure you're asking questions and,
Brian, I just want to contextualize this. So this was at the time where those of us who were outside of the procurement space, just regular human beings and citizens and residents, are sort of seeing headlines in the news of National Guard units being sent out to protect imports. And this is all against this environment of trying to provide fluidity in the marketplace. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it was, we sat there and we said, what can we do as a partner with government to really help find solutions? And we said, hey, we have this massive vendor network. And vendors at the time were, not just, supplying what they had, but we were starting to see some vendors retrofit their manufacturing facilities. So as we send out these RFIs, you would have, all of a sudden a vendor in New Jersey has retrofitted their factory and they're doing gowns now, or they're doing face masks now. And so it was a great way to basically get out there and find vendors. And so that was one of the tools that we used to help our customer base.
So the parallel here almost feels like it's the Federal Reserve providing liquidity solutions during a crisis. You're trying to put as much supply into the marketplace as possible so that your government partners can have access to it. Is that a fair appreciation?
That's fair. That's fair. But I mean, there were also, our government partners were, the mass quantities they needed, they were having to find alternative solutions that were larger scale and maybe having to deal with overseas. But this was a way to get some scale quickly. So that's, that was, as we saw an emergency response, what could we do in the market and what's going to happen going forward? I think these are still solutions in procurement transformation that work going forward as you replenish. And now we've learned a lot, and there's a way to, to do this, I think, in a very efficient manner. And I think procurement transformation is key to moving towards this. Then stepping off into really supplier diversity, we're really starting to hear that move to the forefront. I know PPE is big, but supplier diversity is becoming an extremely hot topic right now. Supplier diversity in procurement transformation is very different in public sector. Public sector is not like private sector. Public sector is you have to have fair and open competition, but you also have, every jurisdiction has their different rules and regulations around this. They have some have, you have to meet certain qualifications, and some just have targets. So when you're thinking procurement transformation, you need to think about solutions that understand this, that understand that they're data-driven solutions. They can configure based on their, and the the jurisdiction they're serving or the state they're serving, but they also have to be able to take it from the time a vendor registers in a system to the time they answer a bid to the time they do a contract, all the way through payment. There's a piece of this that is actually totally designed by public sector, and that is subcontractor processing. In the environment of vendor diversity, subcontractor processing is big because you have all these subs to primes. And how do you confirm that they actually got payment? So you need solutions in the market that actually can confirm that payment back to that vendor that was part of a contract that is a minority, women owned, or diversity type vendor. So a little bit on transformation and supplier diversity that we've seen in the market. We saw one of our customers really focus on, and this was the state of Massachusetts, veteran-owned businesses. And they're actually able to see a 587% uptick when they implemented the solution, and they really concentrated on veteran-owned businesses. And that is true transformation and supplier diversity. In Philadelphia, there was a 300% increase in supplier responses, and that was small business responses. We've seen in really across the enterprise, we've seen a 10x, more minority, women-owned suppliers respond with true transformation. And there's been a 60% increase in local underutilized suppliers that have gotten to participate. So in this kind of environment, you really need, with the supplier diversity programs that are happening out there, you need solutions that have a marketplace that can focus on supplier diversity. You have a large vendor database that brings out supplier diversity, but you also need e-pro partners that understand there's various integrations to help promote this. You may be, you may have to integrate to a revenue system because that's where it's being tracked, or you may have to integrate to a DOT system because that's where it's being tracked and certified. So you have to understand that each environment's kind of different, and that you need solutions that can actually, help drive that supplier diversity.
Ryan, can I ask you a couple of questions about this? So if I'm the governor of a state, and I say this as a foreign national with no right to vote, but let's imagine like Schwarzenegger, I become the governor of California, but just with a British accent rather than an Austrian one. This is a situation where we're plowing funds into, let's use PPE as an example, but I as a governor want to know that the money is actually making it to veteran-owned businesses, that the money is making it to minority and women-owned businesses, that it's not stuck with a prime somewhere. That's the point that you're making here.
Yeah, and you also need to have solutions that bring those vendors to the top, that you can configure your e-procurement or your marketplace system that brings those kind of vendors to the top of the equation. I mean, you can still compare price, but it gives them an equal footing on how to compete in that environment, if that makes sense.
And is this also adding a supply security lens to supply diversity as well, in the sense of, I think if 50 states are with the same prime vendor for any particular piece of equipment or material, the more, even if you are having to pay a little bit more, having more locally diverse suppliers actually gives you a degree of supply security. Is that fair to say as well?
I think so. I mean, I think supplier security also comes about of having more than one supplier that can supply, right? But it also has that, we've always been a big believer, I have, in that the small business is key to your state, right? They're local, so you want to help, channel your tax dollars there. And you want a solution that actually can help you not only, search, find, buy, but also promote. So say you're doing, an acquisition in a given commodity or service class, and you're not getting any participation by those local vendors. You need a solution that you can actually track that, find that, and be able to reach out and say, hey, why are you not participating? We have these opportunities. So it's actually an outreach tool.
Yeah. I may be taking your comments off track a little bit here, but you are you have served on both public and private sector sides of the equation. You're now an entrepreneur, and so not to throw stereotypes at you, but Austin, Texas, a tech entrepreneur, like there's a mindset and a way of doing business that arguably is not the stereotype of being a government official. But it strikes me that government officials in procurement have had to act entrepreneurially for the past few months. What are your observations about the opportunity for collaboration and deep partnership between private and public sector generally? What can change as a result of this era?
Well, I mean, I think that's part of the reason, I helped found this business with a partner of mine is that, I learned a lot working at the state of Texas in the 90s. Wow, that sounds like a long time ago. But as a special assistant comptroller, we had what was called Texas Performance Review, and we saved the state $8 billion, the team did. And I learned a lot internally working for a state of how you can affect change, right? So we started this business exactly for that reason, to build public-private partnerships on change. And that's why we talk more transformation than we do kind of e-procurement, because that's what it is. It's a procurement transformation. So I think there's huge opportunities in this partnership, and we saw it during the PPE crisis. We tried to step in the best we could and help, and there were a lot of other vendors that did. I mean, I got to tell you, there were some e-bidding solutions in the market that they were giving their solution away for free. So you got to see the industry try to step in and help the best we could with our partners, and how can we do that together? So, and not just our company, but I think a lot of companies really tried to step in, and entrepreneurs, and try to help during this crisis.
On that note, given that you've played sort of both sides of the fence, so to speak, do you have any guidance for the public sector audience here right now for how to defend against opportunism from the private sector? So there's always this tension around partnership and fair balance and putting lines. Having, again, worked both sides, how do you find that balance?
So finding the balance is, I mean, I think you have to look at, we saw a lot of opportunists, right? And we had them actually trying to come through our marketplace. And I think it's the vetting, right? You have to do solid vetting. You have to understand, who's been successful, how they've been successful. So I think that's key, is you got to make sure when you're going to do business, there's vetting. But I heard a little bit of talk about agile process on the last presentation, which I thought was interesting, because what we've pitched a lot about is more of an agile procurement process, which allows a state to really get to know the vendors, get to understand the vendors, and get to understand the business proposition. When you sit in an RFP environment, it's very closed, and there's not a lot of give and take, and you really don't get to understand each other. If you work through more of an agile process, which is what our company has become, is more agile, you really get to understand the vendor, and the vendor gets to understand the problem, and you get to work in an iterative process on how to acquire. And I think always getting to know who you're working with is key to success, right? Because you got to know at the end of the day, do you trust each other, as partners? And I think in an RFP, it's just such a closed environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. Brian, in the last minute or so that we have, do you have any sort of closing comments or recommendations? That Jamie Shaw of the state of Maine made the comment earlier that we're in an emergency, but not every situation is an emergency or a crisis. Do you have any final guidance for our audience who are grappling with what is a priority and what isn't?
I think priority right now is from an emergency procurement standpoint is I think you have to stockpile a little bit. You have to get stuff in place, because I think there's going to be a bigger wave. So I think being prepared, and I think most states understand that, are getting there. So I would be there, but I would also start thinking about supplier diversity. I think that is the next kind of major push you're going to see, what I would call politically. it's going to be a major push. So I think it's important for the state administrators to understand that and that get ahead of that, right? Get ahead of this supplier diversity thing that's coming down the path.